Okay, welcome everybody. This is I think it's our number 4 webinar from Garrett. We're talking about how to make your interview more successful. And thanks again for spending the time here. I'm pretty sure a lot of you are in the process of getting a job or preparing yourself for a career in Canada. Some of you probably have already got an interview opportunity, and you just don't know, how do I prepare? What do I do? And during and after. So I just want to double check again. Can everyone hear my voice?
I can hear you, Brian.
Perfect. Perfect. So if you don't hear me, just make sure your speaker is on. We'll just get started, and you'll find a lot of good, useful information here. Hopefully, you'll find that. And Gary will go through his experience, how he coaches people to prepare for interviews. I'm sure you'll find this very useful. Okay, so we'll just hand it over to Garrett.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, awesome. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. For those of you who have joined a previous webinar, welcome back. For those of you this is their first time, my name is Garrett McGilvery. I am one of the co-founders of UniExplore, and I will be hosting this career counseling webinar today. The main focus of it being how to make your interview successful. Now, why should you be listening to me? What is sort of my experience, a bit of my background? Prior to co-founding UniExplore, I was also a co-founder of a fintech company. I think roughly we had about 40 to 50 employees at one point in time. I was the hiring manager there, as well as the chief operating officer and chief technology officer. So I've gone through a great deal of number of employees. I've hosted, well over a couple hundred interviews, both from the perspective of phone calls to in person to panels, so a number of different types. And me personally, I've gone through a number of interviews throughout my career. So I have fairly significant experience from both the side of an individual that's going in to do the interview themselves, as well as the individual that would be hosting the interview and selecting the individual for a particular role. So without further ado, the agenda today, we have a number of different awesome topics we're going to talk about. Just in terms of the format of this, it'll be approximately 15 to 20 minutes in length, and I do encourage a lot of Q&A afterwards. That can run anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. So in total, this will be about 20 to 30 minutes, depending on the number of questions that everybody has after the webinar itself. So first things first, whenever somebody asks me a question on how do I become more successful at an interview, the number one thing that I say is research. Okay, now what does this mean? So some individuals feel that they can just do it off the cuff and they can go into an interview and they can just outshine any of the other competition without doing any research beforehand, and that is simply not what happens. The people that do the most research are the best prepared, and those are the ones that end up being the most successful for the interview itself. Now, what does this mean? Now, the first things first is, what job are you applying for? This means that you have to read the job description thoroughly and understand the needs of the particular position. Because if you understand the needs of the position, you can then best communicate how you suit those needs. Because if they are looking for an individual that is a particularly dynamic team player, then you have to be well prepared with examples on how you are a dynamic team player. Now, this could be whether you are, particularly interested in sports. That could be an angle that you could play where you can talk about your team player attitude, or simply your ability to work well with others on projects throughout university. Now, the job description has a lot of hints in terms of what they are looking for an individual, including in the qualifications, as well as sometimes they offer a bit of information about the culture of the company itself and the individuals that they're looking to hire through that culture. So I recommend highly really reading that job description and understanding the person they're looking for, so that you can then develop and look into your own mind and your own background of experience to find as many examples as possible that allow you to be the best possible candidate that can solve and fit each and every one of the criteria that they have. So that means having a background example case for basically every single one of the qualifications they have, whether it being how you demonstrate your analytical ability, your ability to execute on problem-solving matters, or ability to, have good time management or organizational skills. These are the number one key things that you have to have ready so that when somebody asks you in an interview, how can you demonstrate how you have strong organizational skills? You have to be able to roll off the cuff and be able to say and speak to how you have those organizational skills based on your past experience. Whether, as I mentioned before, whether it's through sports, whether it's through school and projects or part-time activities or full-time activities, you have to have those ready so that you can execute during the interview itself. Now, another good thing to do when you're researching for this particular role is say some of these roles might not be, particularly unique. This might be a business analyst position or, an intro engineering position at a mid-sized to large-sized firm. A lot of these roles have been done before. They've had interviews before. A good example I can put is, if you're applying to go to Deloitte or if you're going to PwC or KPMG as a chartered accounting student, these are roles that, pop up every 9 months, maybe even sooner, maybe every 3 to 4. So these are not particularly new and they're quite generic. If you look on the internet, a lot of individuals that have had past interview experience with these companies will in fact post interview questions that they have had for these particular companies. So if you search Deloitte accounting student or Deloitte consulting entry-level position, these individuals that have had these interviews before will put a big list of questions that they've had on certain websites, such as, say, Glassdoor. Glassdoor would be one of them. There's a number of other sites that are out there, including forums where individuals like to post in regards to their own, type of branch of education, such as accounting or consulting, stuff like that. So you will find a lot of different interview questions that are there, and it's a good bank to study off of and understand, because then these are questions that are formulated from the HR individuals within that company, and these are going to be trickled down into the interviews themselves because they're required questions. This doesn't necessarily work as well for a small company, but for a mid to large size firm with a standardized HR process, this is incredibly effective because these questions are generally mandated from HR themselves. So they will more often or not be included in the actual interview where, out of, say, the 10 potential questions an individual will ask you, maybe 7 to 8 of them will be standardized, whereas 2 of them will be based on the interviewer's own personal, desires, and they'll might ask a question that's outside of these HR regulated questions. The next thing that I would recommend in terms of doing research on a particular job role is to really understand the company, okay? So from small, medium to large size firms, each of these companies has a culture. And the more that you understand this culture, the greater that you can shape your experiences and what you're talking about with the interviewer around your own experiences. Because say the culture of the particular firm is very problem-solving and entrepreneurial, then you can make sure to continuously mention the experiences that highlight your entrepreneurial and, open-minded based skills, okay? Versus a company that strides themselves in their professionalism and accuracy and attention to detail, then you shape your experiences based around that. So just to break that out into sort of a bit more layman terms, if the company prides themselves on, say, accuracy, you want to make sure that when they're asking you interview questions, you highlight your abilities based on your experiences in regards to accuracy. So you want to shape even your organizational skills, even your problem-solving skills, and try to relate it a bit to accuracy, because then these individuals know that they're looking for that. HR is looking for that, and that's sort of the culture of the firm in terms of the individuals that are going there. The company that I was a part of really highly valued entrepreneurial spirit. So whenever an individual highlighted that, even in a remote, small way, even if it's a small company that they failed at, or they tried to start, or they were part of a small startup before that, or something along those lines, we highlighted and looked at those employees significantly more than any of the other ones that had applications with us, even if they had, you know, more in-depth experience with the very niche skill that we were looking for. If they had that entrepreneurial side of things, then we would definitely consider them more highly than the other individuals. Now, the next thing that I would say is a very highly important thing when you're looking for an interview is, again, research. Okay, I want to highlight that twice, because research and being prepared is probably the number one thing that you can do when you're getting ready for an interview. Now, the next step in terms of preparedness and research is getting to know your interviewer. Now, sometimes you will generally have a direct email from the interviewer themselves scheduling an interview with you. This will only be effective in this particular instance if it's being scheduled through HR and they don't tell you who it is in fact interviewing you. Then you can sort of gloss over these points, because that won't particularly help. But if in fact you do know the interviewer, the number one thing that you should do is just research that individual. Learn who they are, what they've done, what their past has been. It is the easiest thing that you can do is just simply look at them on LinkedIn and see their past experiences. How long have they been at this company? What other companies have they been at? Is there a biography of them online or something like that? Because what you're looking for is just more info on the individual themselves, so that you can sort of shape up who this person is. Because if this is a very serious and very stern individual who, might not have a lot of, may I say, creativity or bubbliness or something like that, then you know that the interview itself is going to be very stern and very serious. So when you're demonstrating your skills, you're going to want to highlight your professionalism and really change the attitude and the general flow of the interview to one that's a little more serious, a little more proper, maybe a little less personal in terms of the content that you're delivering. So you might not want to generally build as much of a personal connection with these individuals because they are so stern. But then if you do find an individual that it might highlight that they in fact really like rock climbing or something like that, and then you particularly like rock climbing too, or if you even have a semi interest, that is something that you can definitely bring up in the interview themselves to form that personal bond. Because as I'm going to talk about in a moment, forming personal bonds and being engaging is by far the best thing that you can do. And the only way that you can truly do that is by being prepared and really understanding who is in the room, what the culture of the company is, and some of the topics that you can talk about, so that you can really project your best self in that instance. Now, a small one that I might talk about is, in terms of research, is reaching out to your connections. So if you don't know who the hiring manager is, or even if you do, you might have contacts, you might have people that you know within your network that might know something about it. So the more that you can tap into that network, and the more that you can get information out of that network, the better. Because if you have somebody that might work in that company, but maybe it's a different department, you got to ask them. You might ask them about this position. You have an interview coming up, if they know anything about it. At the very least, they're going to give you the name of the individual that's going to be running that interview, and that'll allow you to do some background research, so that you can maybe get a little bit of a leg up, a little bit of an edge when you're going into the room, because you're going to know some things about that individual that are going to help you in terms of projecting your best self, or being engaging and forming a personal connection. So on top of research, I'd say some of the best things that you can do is practice. Okay. So what that means is you can do it yourself in terms of reading that question bank of questions that you've researched on that company. You might have a few, or different job questions that are semi-related to the job that you're applying for, such as, say, a business analyst. They might ask questions like, what's your biggest what's your biggest weakness? Or please demonstrate a time that you've had, to utilize your problem solving skills in a team-based environment. Or how have you had to name a time that you've had to deal with a difficult individual and how did you resolve it? So these are all very standardized interview questions that you might face, but you got to be prepared for them. So like you can ask them to yourself and, formulate and write down an answer so that you're prepared. Now, the next best thing that you can do is have it done with an individual. Even if they ask you if you give them a list of questions to ask you, you can just do a simple mock interview yourself so that that individual can give you some good feedback. Because the more feedback that you get when you're doing an interview, the better. Because that interviewer might see that you, in fact, aren't making enough eye contact, or you're staring at the ground, or your legs are trembling, or you're talking too much with your hands, or you're saying or too much. Because a lot of these things aren't very noticed by you while you're doing the interview themselves or talking about your own experiences, because psychologically you're just going to miss them because there are those little gaps in the space and time when in between questions, in between formulating thoughts that you don't see. Versus if another individual can very easily pick up on those items and give you that necessary feedback so that you can understand that you might be talking too fast, so the person might not be able to hear you, or the experiences that you give don't really demonstrate the skill that you're trying to portray, or that your leg is trembling and you need that to stop. Because those are all sort of, not the greatest things that you can do in an interview. Now, on top of research, I would say that the best thing that you can do is be prepared. Now, I've talked about researching the different job descriptions, the different skills for similar jobs, the different types of company networks that are out there. But you have to be able to really understand and dig deep on the skills that you have and the experiences that you have so that you can truly demonstrate your best self in an interview. So that means whatever question that they ask, you have a strong bank of experiences and different types of skills that you can talk to them about based on the questions that they have. So they might ask you left range questions or random questions about, your past experiences or things that are on your resume. So be sure to have, a solid understanding and in-depth knowledge of what you've actually put on your resume itself and have the ability to talk about it at length so that you can show the individual that everything that you've written on the resume at first is truthful in terms of your skills, such as organizational skills or problem-solving skills, but also that you have even more depth than what might be there on the resume itself. Because you don't want the resume to be the true extent of who you are and what your skills are. You want that to just be a sampler and or teaser of, all the things that you actually do have. In addition to understanding your resume, your own skills, and your background experience, and having those, tidbits of knowledge on hand, if you have business cards that are, say, you're a fresh student from university, that you have some cards from, say, McMaster or U of T or whatever business society that you have, definitely bring those. It's always great to just leave those behind because those are just a little, tidbit and a thank you and a reminder. In terms of your dress and apparel, you have to definitely be dressed business professional, basically for every type of interview, even if the individual might be dressed down or that they'll be dressed down in terms of business casual or less. You want to be that individual that's dressed up. So in terms of dressing yourself in the best possible way and with the best possible clothes that you have, because that only leaves a very good impression, because that means that you're going to show and demonstrate to them that you take this seriously and that you are professional. And if you are able to dress professionally, you are professional, and then you can convey a more professional message. And psychologically, that is just going to be an extra bonus to every interviewer that you have. Because if you show up, and you're not dressed well, or you're dressed, in sweatpants or, jeans or something like that, you might give off a bad impression. versus, anybody in a suit or anybody in a pantsuit or in a dress type of thing is only going to look good. You're generally going to feel good too, so it's just going to be better on your own psyche, and the interviewer will no doubt be impressed. And last but not least, you definitely have to be on time. Being late is not a good thing. You always want to be slightly early. So whenever you do have plans to travel to the particular interview, you have to make sure that you haven't allotted time for being late, in terms of like whether it be subway delays, streetcar delays, traffic delays, whatever it might be. In case that you are in fact actually late because of something that, has happened, you generally will know about it probably 10, 15, at least 20 minutes ahead of time that you're going to be late because you say you're stuck in traffic, or, your car broke down or something like that. The best thing that you can do in that scenario is just sort of let them know and send them an email. That's because then at least you give them a heads up. You know that you're telling them that you're still on the way. You have not ghosted them, so that they know that you're going to be there at some point in time. And then you're giving them a courtesy of knowing that their time is important, just as same as yours. Okay. Now, what I mean by being engaging. Being engaging. Now, the number one thing that you can do in an interview is form a personal connection. Regardless of how you answer the questions themselves, if you can form a personal connection, you will have a leg up on basically every other individual that's going to be showing up through that door. Okay? Because a personal connection means that you are one step closer to friendship with that individual versus the individuals that just come in the room, answer the questions, and then leave. That shows that they have some pretty decent professional experience, and they're able to convey their skills and stuff like that. But those individuals that can make that personal connection are always a leg up than every other individual that's in that room. So what do I mean by personal connection? You have to be able to make some sort of inside connection with the interviewer themselves. So back when I was talking about doing research on the interviewer, if you can see or research or see that they have some form of interest that aligns with yours, whether that's rock climbing, theater, music, movies, video games, skateboarding, something along those lines, martial arts, anything. If you can find anything about that interviewer, and if they have some form of connection with yours, and this has to be genuine, just because if it isn't genuine, most people can see that in terms of don't fake that you're interested in the theater. If you aren't, then that's okay. And that person is, that's totally fine, because there's all sorts of other things that an individual has. Because if you think about yourself, you're infinitely complex. You have lots of different desires, wants, hobbies, interests, stuff like that. This interviewer is the same way. So they also have a significant amount of interests, hobbies, skills, all those types of things. It's just trying to find the ones that align with yours so that you can talk about them. Because after you break the ice with a couple questions and say you bring up or make mention of, say, rock climbing, let's say that the interviewer is involved with rock climbing, then you can bring that up in the form of an answer to a question, so that then that gives the chance to the interviewer to poke on that. Because this person may have been a semi-pro rock climber at one point in time. And if you say you're a rock climber too, then that forms a personal bond, because then you might have that small micro chat about rock climbing. And that small micro chat that you have around rock climbing is what really bridges the gap from stranger to friendship. And when you make that bridge, you're already put at a tier higher than anyone else that's in the room, than anybody else that's going to interview for that job. Because at that point, you are in closer to that friendship zone. So whenever an individual is looking to hire for somebody, they obviously want to hire somebody that has shared hobbies and shared interests as them, because they know that that person will be interesting and engaging to work with. And with the alignment of hobbies and the alignment of sort of friendship and bridging that gap, you're significantly more interested, because it's as similar as being a referral, where if you're referred into a position by somebody that's already known, then you're not a stranger anymore. You're a referral. Similar to this, where you're making that personal connection, you're no longer a stranger. You are a person that that person has a connection with, which is the ultimate thing that you can do in an interview itself. And it's okay if you can't make a connection, because some people just can't make connections with other people until you find that right mix of people. Because certain people won't actually, in fact, have the similar interests as you. And you won't be able to bridge that gap and make that personal connection. But some people will. And when you find those people and when you're being interviewed by those people, you'll know. And then you have that moment and you have that personal connection. And that's where you really, shine yourself out and, make a true impact on the interview itself. So finding that particular topic that they're interested in, that you're also interested in, and finding that alignment is generally done by either research or luck. Doing research will help increase those chances exponentially, because you're looking out for things that are sort of earmarked for, interesting factors in that individual that are just going to help amplify your interview exponentially. Now, in an interview, you got to be yourself. This is the same when I'm talking about when you are trying to be engaging. You got to be yourself in the interview. So even when you first walk in that door and you first have that conversation with the person that's behind the counter, or sorry, across the desk, and having that interview, you got to be yourself. You got to be able to project all the skills. You got to project all the hobbies. You got to project all the interests that you can in that interview, so that you can hopefully make sure that that individual knows how good you are in terms of being in that role, and how interesting and engaging you are to be a person to work with. Because at the end of the day, this individual is generally going to be a hiring manager, or generally be somebody that's going to be, involved in your role in some way. And you have to understand that this individual not only wants somebody that is good at their job, but also somebody that they can, get along with. Because if you are a person that might be a bit dry, or might not necessarily come off as very friendly, that won't be positive for you in the interview itself. Because this individual that's a hiring manager, if you think about it from their shoes, they want to have somebody on the team that's going to be fun or engaging or interesting, or in some way, out there enough so that they can know that while you can do the job, you can also be, a good person, and you can also be somebody that can be engaged with on a friendlier level. Because again, by doing research and understanding who the interviewer is, they might be more outgoing. They might be looking for more salesy people. They might be looking for people that want to have, fun in terms of, having a dynamic and rich culture as part of the company. But you have to be prepared for all those things so that you can just, shine through all the elements of you that make you you, whether it be, your interest in theater, or, you might be a semi-pro basketball player, or anything along those lines. Those are just great things to bring up, so that in addition to showing all the skills that you have, you also get to show the type of depth you have as a person. Okay. Because by showing that depth only allows you to form a bigger and better personal connection with individuals, so that you can, form that personal bond, form that connection with the interviewer, and then just amplify yourself amongst your competition. Now, that sums up basically the webinar that I have for you today. I now open basically the period for questions and answers.
Perfect. So we do have, it's already 9:35. We've got 10 to 15 minutes. So just feel free to post your questions here. We have one question, here waiting for you, Garrett. It might be a short answer, answer you can provide. So, when people search on LinkedIn, if suggest you use LinkedIn as kind of like a starting point for preparation for the interview. But what if people can see, oh, someone has searched my profile, they just don't, I guess people just don't want to get a impression, so is there a way? I know LinkedIn has a good setting that you can do, you can actually set up. Can you just, briefly talk about that, so people are not being, paranoid about, the histories?
even if the individual sees that you search them, that's okay. Like that again, it's not going to be anything negative, because then they might look at you too, or they might not even check their LinkedIn. There's not really going to be a point where that's going to be negative. If anything, it's just going to show that it's positive because you have the initiative to actually, look them up. And they know that now. They know that you've looked them up. That's okay. But you're demonstrating initiative if they see that. And that's only a positive thing, because initiative is a really hard thing to convey in an interview itself. But, all these small little teeny things might add up to, giving you a bit of an edge in that front. So I wouldn't worry about them seeing the fact that you've looked at their account, anything like that. It's not intrusive. Like the only intrusive thing I could say is like if you look them up on Facebook and start liking all their photos, that might be a bit too far.
Yeah.
But LinkedIn is totally fine. It's open and fair game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and basically, one thing I just want to point out is if you are looking, if you're looking at people's LinkedIn profiles and you don't mind people knowing you are checking their profiles, make sure you have a good LinkedIn profile. Make sure your LinkedIn is as concrete as your resume. Just you don't want to go in there, letting people know someone's looking at them, and then you don't have anything on your LinkedIn. All right, so
Good
that's
point,
just
Brian.
a reminder. Okay, so the next question we have is, could you please suggest some strategies that people can use when they got questions in the interview that they didn't prepare for? I think that's kind of one of the top questions people ask. So, Gary, do you want to just shed some lights on that too?
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes you're going to have interview questions that are completely out there, that aren't going to make any sense at all, or, it might be random testing questions, because sometimes people are going to ask you questions to test your thinking ability and test your ability to think off your feet. For example, this is a very random one, but I've been asked the question, how many manholes are in the city of New York City? And, that one is quite random. There's no way that anybody would ever know that off the cuff. But what they're looking for in that particular case, in that particular question, is your ability to formulate a thought. So all you do is that there is no right answer to those types of questions. You just have to be able to convey your methodology and your thinking ability in order to make that work. So for that particular question, a good answer might be, well, I would count every manhole within 1 square kilometer, which is feasible, and multiply it by the number of square kilometers within the city of New York, or something like that. So those types of questions are generally going to be pushed to individuals in more analytical and thinking roles and problem solving roles, because that's how they test your problem solving abilities, right? By asking you these sort of random questions or these math based questions off the cuff, and then just sort of seeing how you handle it. So again, there's lots of different ways that you can answer that question, and they're not looking for a truly authentic and accurate answer, but they want to see you formulate a thought. So as long as you convey that thought and it has some grounding in terms of like feasibility, you're good to go. In terms of other, more soft skill questions that you might not be prepared for, such as like, what's your name a time, like when you started naming an experience, the time that you dealt with a difficult customer or something like that. It's okay to say that, it's okay to ask a bit more questions in terms of like really narrowing down what they want to hear, so that you might get a bit more clarity, and it might give you a bit more time to sort of think of something off the cuff. But then you can also sort of maybe stretch a truth a bit. So even if you had a mild case of dealing with a customer that had a bit of an issue when you're doing, say, a retail job or something like that, giving an example on that, and maybe just stretching the barriers of sort of what might have actually transpired in that case. Now, I'm not telling you to lie or anything like that, but it at least demonstrates that you've had some form of experience with conflict resolution, because that's the skill that they're looking for there, and demonstrating. And another good thing is, even if you haven't had a conflict resolution moment with, say, a customer in a retail job, because say you only work there for 3 months or 4 months, you might have had to deal with a conflict resolution with somebody in your family or somebody at school or something like that. You can answer it in that regard too. You can very blatantly say that I actually haven't had to deal with a difficult customer yet. I haven't had to utilize my conflict resolution skills in my present retail job, but there was a time when I was in a school group scenario. It was a project, and there was a difficult member part of the team, and then I had to, utilize my conflict resolution skills there, and then go along that note. So it doesn't have to be applicable to the particular, job that they're asking you about. You could broaden it, and it's totally fine to say that because they're looking for a defined skill. So as long as you understand what the skill is that they're trying to look for, you can sort of apply it to some other aspect of your life or experience.
Yeah, thanks, Garrett. I think I really agree with you on the point that interview sometimes it's not a test. It's more like experience sharing. It's building a relationship with those people, with the interviewers. So I think that's very inspiring for a lot of people here. And the next question I have is, I think you addressed this in your slides already briefly, but if you can just kind of share more ideas about this. Is it normal to talk about personal interests during the interview, or it's solely about the job?
So yeah, you generally don't want to go out in the interview and just start randomly sharing all of your personal hobbies and experiences and stuff like that. But as part of the interview itself, say you talk to the individual and you ask them how their night was, or how the day before was, or how's your day going, or something like that, or do you have any plans for the weekend? These are all small little questions that can help open up for some form of personal connection that you can make between that individual. Because if this is say a Thursday or a Friday or something like that, and you ask, oh, do you have any plans for the weekend? And they might say, hey, yeah, I'm actually going camping in Algonquin, or I'm going rock climbing at Yosemite, or I'm flying to China, or something like that. Then you can pick on that point, or pick on whatever piece of information that they've conveyed, and elaborate on it, and probe it to sort of start a more personal connection that's not related to the job itself, but allows you to form a bit of that bond. Okay.
Mhm.
That's probably the best thing that you can do. It might take time. It might not be successful because the individual might be like, "Oh yeah, I don't know, nothing planned." Then you know what? That's fine. You didn't garner enough information in order to sort of start sharing a linked interests between the two of you. But there might be other points during the interview, whether you've researched something about them, like that they're a black belt in jujitsu or something like that, and you might be able to lay down in one of your examples that you know do martial arts, because you might be able to say that you had conflict resolution skills in martial arts, or you demonstrated a time where you had to deal with a tough situation in a martial art based environment, and they might pick up on that based on their own experiences, and then you sort of start a personal conversation from there.
Great. So I think it's about 9:45 right now, but I just wrap up with one last question. I think we're almost done with the questions. Gary, you have experience in basically technology, operation, and also real estate, and now you're a pretty successful investment banker. So for students who are especially for international students, the people you have coached, the people you're friends with, what are your top suggestions for them before they go into the interview? And what would you say? Here are the three things I've noticed that international students, or some of my friends from China, they probably need to work on better. So what are the top three tips you want to give to them?
Yeah, so in terms of top three tips, I'd say the first one is that you got to be confident. So when you're going into an interview, you got to be confident with first your language ability. Like, this might be tough because obviously English might be your second language. It's going to be difficult. That's okay. Like, when you're not speaking clear English, as long as it's understandable, and even if you do have a thick accent, something like that, that is again okay. You just have to not, you know, be shaky with your voice. You just got to project confidence, even with, say a 90% ability in order to speak English at that level. That's okay. Because as long as you have that confidence, everything's going to be fine. All right. So I wouldn't worry about that too much, because if you practice and practice and practice and practice, your English is going to get better and better and better and better. That means that even before you take an interview, even before you start job hunting, just try to take as many times as possible to sort of practice on your English skills in a conversational environment with sort of native speakers. Because again, you're going to get better and better and better and better. And then you're going to be completely fluent with no accent. You'll be totally fine. So as long as you practice, everything will be good. The number two skill that I would say is, number two tip that I would probably say for international students is you got to really, let's say, dress to impress. I've had a few international students that have come through my door when I've been doing hiring, and they didn't really present themselves as, a professional individual, in the sense of the way that they dress, the way that they handle themselves. From first the handshake. Now, this is probably a lot harder for some individuals, maybe even female individuals, but you got to have a really good, strong, hard handshake in order to sort of demonstrate that professionalism right off the bat. A limp and soft handshake is probably the worst thing that you can receive from an individual at the start of an interview. And that only just leaves a bad taste in your mouth from, beginning to end. You got to have a good, firm, hard handshake, and even test it with some of your friends or something like that. Just squeeze somebody's hand until the point where it's, nice and firm. You can generally squeeze somebody's hand firmer than you'd ever think is possible, and then you'll be totally fine. Okay. But squeeze somebody's hand. Okay. Don't have a limp fish handshake. That's the worst thing that you can have.
Yeah.
Okay. Second, I'd probably say, like, you got to dress to impress, put on that suit. Get it fitted. Don't have a boxy suit. Make sure that it fits nicely for guys, and for pantsuits and or dresses for girls, just make sure it's nice and professional. Solid business attire. The best thing you can do is just search it up on Google. Professional business clothing, whatever for females. Like, you'll be fine there. Guys, just again, trim suit, put a tie on, and then make sure that your colors are neutral. I've had a guy that's come in for an interview with like a floral shirt on, underneath like a blue suit or something like that, and just do neutral colors. Don't do anything that particularly stands out, but just as long as it looks sharp and it looks clean cut, you're good to go. Third tip I would probably say to people would be really probably that research element, because a lot of people, even Western people, don't do that. And it is probably the most important thing that anybody could do. And this is for everyone. So this isn't just international students that are looking to get a job here. Even people that are here don't do this, because a lot of people will walk into an interview and not really understand what the role is. And if you don't understand what the role is, how are you going to be able to pull off a good interview? Because you're not even going to know what they're looking for. So you're just randomly saying experiences and trying to form some form of personal connection, but you're just making shots in the dark there. If you're an individual that's already researched the position, know exactly what they're looking for, more beneficial if you know who the interviewer is and you know some of their past experiences, your percentage chance of rocking that interview goes up so much, because you're prepared. The more prepared you are, the better. There's no such thing as being, too prepared in any form of scenario at all.
Yeah, those are very good tips. And Garrett, I really agree with you on the handshake thing. It's so important, and a lot of people don't really pay much attention to that. So yeah, I think those are great tips to everybody. We're running out of time, 9:50 right now. Thanks again, Garrett, and thanks again for everybody joining the session. We are, if you guys want to, if you're a WeChat user, here are the 3 QR codes you can use to subscribe to our account. In the middle one, if you want to find out how Garrett can actually help you with your career, we do have some programs available. So, if you scan the one in the middle, you'll be able to find out how to book a meeting with Garrett to go through a resume and that stuff. And if you haven't filled out your community form, make sure you do that. And if you don't use WeChat, send us an email. We'll figure out how to help you. Info at UniExplore.com. Okay.
And Ryan, just to add to that, just just so everybody knows, we do offer I do offer 30-minute sessions with each and every one of you, any individual that wants to sign up. These are one-on-one. I do go through basically everything from your resume to sort of LinkedIn, sort of a bit of your goals. And I do just give high-level advice on sort of where you should be, where you should go, and what type of sector you should be looking for, and sort of those top tips. I do cram a lot into those 30-minute sessions, so they're have been very well received by individuals, and I do try to, help you out as best I possibly can.
Perfect. Yeah, and if you guys want to sign up for that, just scan the middle one to book a one-on-one meeting with Garrett, and someone will be in touch. Perfect. I think that wraps up our session, and thanks again, and everybody, good night. We'll see you next time.